to work with industry heavyweights such as Intel, Dell, AMD, HPE, Oracle, Microsoft, and AWS. He's developed a wide breadth of knowledge around cutting edge technologies from low-level processor architecture to database and enterprise applications, and most recently, public and private cloud technologies. At VMware for 5 years, Juan has led a team of senior level engineers located in the US, Canada, and Europe, whose focus is to make VMware products fast, efficient, and scalable to meet their customers' most demanding needs. And he's also very passionate about creating an inclusive environment where everyone is encouraged to bring their whole self to work. I love that. Hand in hand with his technical role, Juan also embraces VMware's philosophy that the company can do well and do good for the communities in which they live, work, and play. And he holds a bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering from UCLA. Welcome, Juan.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it, Danielle. Yeah. So welcome, everybody. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate the fact that it's Friday afternoon, the last session of the day, and you all are making the time to step in here. So I do appreciate it. And you have my name here. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Please feel free. No issues on my end. Feel free to connect and reach out to me after this presentation if you have any comments, questions, or anything else I can help with. All right, so I'm going to jump in real quick. Right at the bottom here, I have this pages.beamery.com. We have a Beamery page for students to sign up or potential applicants. So not now, not during my presentation, after the presentation. Please take that link, cut and paste it, and then go and fill in. What that does is it gets you in directly into our recruiter database. So all of your information, your bio, your resume, everything you fill in there will just get sucked right into our database, and it'll be accessible, searchable, viewable by all of our recruiters and hiring managers inside VMware. So as a hiring manager, really appreciate people going in and getting their information in there, because then I can go in and look for top talent whenever I have positions open on my team. So I've got it in the chat there. If you have any issues, again, feel free to reach out to me. But I'll go ahead and get started now with the presentation. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today? And I apologize. I hate presentations that are just slides full of text. And that's what I have today, right? I mean, I thought about what can I do to spice this up a little bit, but really there's a lot of content. I'll try to go through it in pieces so that it's a little bit easier to follow. And actually, one question that I'm not so sure about, maybe Danielle, or you can answer, is this presentation going to be made available to these students? Like if I can send it to you or somehow get it over to MESA to make it available? Because there's links and a bunch of information in here that I think would be useful for them to have.
Yes, sure. Absolutely. We'll be able to share the deck out on Jumpstart to our students, and this will also, we can also record and put on our YouTube channel. So yeah, you're all good.
Okay, fantastic, good. All right, so this is an agenda. I won't go through it here. Let me just kind of jump into it, but there's a bunch of stuff that we're covering. Okay, so first, this is a technical interviewing session, but I would be remiss if I didn't just cover some general interviewing tips, right? Some of the most important ones. Always prepare for the interview, because this does have a kind of a technical interview slant. Always think about, what problems have you solved? What are some of the interesting or technical issues that you've had to get over, whether in your student projects or in some internships. Think about that. Go through that thought process ahead of time. Research the company. I'm sure you've heard that many times. Learn about the business or products division. Research the interviewers. Go on LinkedIn. Look over their profile. Just search their names. I mean, hopefully you don't find anything too extravagant out there, but really search for publications and conferences that they've been a part of. And then you'll get a sense of, okay, what has this person done? Maybe that gives you an in there, something you've done that's similar to them, or some interest that you have that's similar to theirs, right? So definitely the research up front, the preparation up front. There's lots of websites and other things that'll tell you what to do about kind of general interviewing tips and how to prepare. But these are a few things that I pulled out. During the interview, And you guys will, please somebody tell me, right? So speak clearly, don't rush. I can sense myself just, I'm going 90 miles an hour here, but definitely, take that time, take that pause. A lot of times when you're in an interview and you're feeling like, oh man, they're waiting on me because they answered a question and you want to rush through it, don't do that. Take a deep breath, speak clearly, don't rush, especially nowadays where everything's online, right? So the other is focus on your accomplishments. And I say this because a lot of us, a lot of times you want to say, you kind of want to be modest and you don't want to brag, and you'll start using we, which is fine when it's appropriate. If you're in a team project and you say, well, we were tasked to do X, Y, and Z, right? So that's fine. But then get to the I. Oh, and as part of that, I did this piece of work, and this is how I went about it, right? And then you start to use the I so that it's clear what you've done. Most interviewers will kind of catch that if you're using we a little bit too much, then they'll ask, well, what did you do, right? What did you do specifically? But still, some may not, so just be aware of that. I'll say here, dress appropriately. It's kind of old school, but I'm old school. But definitely not a tux, not a suit and tie or whatever. But show them that you're taking this seriously. Again, nowadays with online, it's a little bit of a mixed bag because they can't really see anyway. But definitely, whatever you can do to show your interviewer that you're taking this seriously, always just helps bolster your case. If in a Zoom interview, look at the camera, and this is general presentation. It's not even interviewing skills, right? General presentation skills. Look at the camera as much as possible. I mean, I'm having to kind of look at my own prompts here, so kind of look down. But I'll tell you, the worst is a lot of people sit at their desk or whatever and have their laptop, and then you end up doing this, and they're talking up here because they're looking at their screen, and that's terrible, right? I don't want to look up anybody's nose when I'm listening to a presentation or doing an interview. So do those little things that just help the presentation skill. I think it's important to keep track of. And then, of course, ask insightful questions based on some of the research that you did earlier, and et cetera, et cetera. I just wanted to get these few key things. Like I said, there's websites that are dedicated to all kinds of things that you need to worry about. These are a few that I pulled out as general interviewing tips. Okay, so what is a technical interview? And here I want to make clear that technical interview is a process. It's more than just one interview. As I noted here, it starts with your initial call with the recruiter, and the recruiter themselves are not going to quiz you technically, but they might ask a couple of probing questions just to make sure. Then you get passed on to engineering, right? Somebody like me, maybe somebody on my team, and on the phone they will grill you a little bit more technically. Sometimes they'll ask you to solve a specific coding question, that kind of stuff, right? And then in some companies, we don't do that so much in VMware, but sometimes there's a coding challenge, like some homework for you to do here. It's a very interesting problem. You get to try to figure out how to solve it. And then if you get pulled into on-site interviews, well, everything I said above, 1, 2, and 3, all gets pulled into an on-site interview. And so again, when we talk about the technical interview, it's really kind of a process where we're trying to vet the candidates, and it's not just a single interview. Okay, so who can benefit from some of these tips that I'm saying here, right? And I don't know what all of your backgrounds are, but again, technical interview, people think, well, does it have to be engineering? Not necessarily, right? Yes, for engineering, and especially nowadays with software and coding challenges and things like that, that's what I think of, right, is a software engineer. But there could be technical program manager roles, project managers, product managers. There's a lot of roles within tech companies, and tech meaning, software, certainly what we're dealing with now, but a lot of roles within, whether you're aerospace or lots of other industries that require technical roles, then there are technical interviews associated with those, right? And again, it doesn't have to be that super technical job or role that gets the technical interview. There's going to be other roles also that need to be technical enough, that need to be savvy enough about the technologies, that need to still be able to function in terms of the problem solving. So I'd say for all of those situations, going through some of this process will be helpful. If you need an understanding of what some of these roles are, online you can find them. And again, the bottom line, as I say in here, right, the technical interview is not synonymous with coding challenge. There's different aspects to the technical interview. Okay, so why a technical interview, right? What is it that the employer is trying to do, right? And I'm going to go through here both the employer and the candidate. And this is one of those big slides that has a ton of text on it. So again, I apologize for that, but we'll walk through it kind of one at a time, so you're not kind of blinded by so much black and white on the screen up front. So first, the employer, the interviewer, is really trying to understand, right? Do you meet our business needs? Do you have good problem solving skills? And this is problem solving in general. All right, this is such a key characteristic that we need in all of our employees, is just being able to solve problems, whether they're technical problems. I mean, sometimes there's people problems. Sometimes there's finance or money budget problems. There's so many different problems. Right? We just need good problem solvers. Do you handle yourself well under stress? So the interview situation is a high stress situation, and it's really a good opportunity for you to showcase your ability to handle yourself under stress. Because when you're on the job, there are going to be very stressful situations. Not every day, not every hour of every day, but still being able to show that you can handle yourself under stress is very important. Can you communicate well, especially some of those deep technical concepts, right? So the other thing we're looking for is help me understand how you're solving this problem, right? So that it tells me a lot as you're solving a technical problem, being able to talk about it, and it tells me a lot about your communication skills, which are absolutely critical in any position, right? So as we go down this, notice it's not everything about having a solution to the problem. It's everything around that that's important as well. Are you able to work independently, right? So we have a problem. You're trying to solve a problem. You can ask some questions and work with the interviewer around it. In fact, I encourage you to. But at the end of the day, it's your problem to solve. So again, this tells me that you can work and do your problem solving independently. And are you able to collaborate with others? And this is interesting because this is just the opposite of what I said on the previous slide, right? When you're talking about your accomplishments, the interviewer wants to know what you as an individual accomplished. So use I, right? I did this. When you're in an interview situation and you're solving a problem, then, and it may seem small, but it kind of makes a difference kind of in the tone of the answer. Then you can use we, right? So if you say, oh, okay, well, let's see if we can solve the problem this way, right? Or okay, well, if we do this, then that'll help us do that, right? So in this case, when you're in the interview and you're solving for whatever the issue is, in that case, if you start to use some of the more inclusive language, in that case, you use the we, even if you're not really directly pulling the interviewer into it, but by using those words, it brings out that aspect, right? Kind of that teamwork aspect of it. So it's like I said, it's small, but it makes a difference in the tone of the interview when you do that. And then other things that may be separate from the specific question they ask is just, do you understand the technology of the business, of the particular business you're going into, right? So again, some of that preparation, some of the work I talked about earlier becomes important. And again, by the way, you still have to show all those other traditional interviewing skills on top of the technical aspects of it. So what are your objectives during the interview? Well, one, it's to demonstrate everything above, right? Demonstrate to the employer, to the interviewer, everything that I just talked about, right? And so how do you do that? Well, listen really carefully to the question, validate your understanding of the problem statement. So that goes into just a communication. Communication, there's outward communication, but there's the ability to listen also is very important. And it doesn't mean you just listen and memorize it and understand everything the first time. Listening means really listening and understanding what the other person is saying. So it's okay, ask clarifying questions to make sure that you understand that. right? So there's a big aspect of communication, of course, is listening. As I mentioned earlier, keep calm, don't rush, take a deep breath if you have to. That really helps actually. The deep breath thing, man, a lot of people say it, but it's because it works, right? So allow yourself to do that and calmly proceed with whatever the interviewer is asking you to do. Again, ask clarifying questions, and I can't say this enough. Right? Being in a number of interviews, um, there's situations where I'm waiting for somebody to ask me a clarifying. There's things where I give you maybe something that's intentionally a little bit vague or nuanced, and so it would really help you if you're trying to solve a problem if you ask some more clarifying questions, right? So I look for that as a skill, because when we're working with each other on the job, a lot of times we'll come together, everybody's super busy. We come together, we have this meeting, and somebody makes a request of me, for example, hey Juan, I need you to do this and I need you to do that, and we got to do this and we got to do it by next week, next Friday, right? And so this is my opportunity to ask those clarifying questions to make sure I understand what's being asked of me and to make sure I deliver what I'm being asked to deliver, right? And if I don't do that, I may just go away and assume some stuff or not understand some things, and then later, sure, I could ask clarifying questions later, um, but sometimes it's hard to get hold of the person again, right? Because everybody's really busy. So asking clarifying questions is just key, and again shows me as an interviewer that you're really listening, that you're really wanting to understand the issue. As you're going through solving it, think out loud. Don't just go silent and stare down at your paper and start writing, and then I'm completely left out of that process, right? Just think out loud. Just talk out loud. What are you doing? What are you thinking? Where are you stuck? What's a challenge? What's challenging you right now about the problem you're trying to solve? Think through all of that. Think through it, but think about it out loud. That helps me understand what you're thinking through and what are different aspects. And maybe by listening to that, if I feel like you're starting to head in the wrong direction, I can pull you back in, right? I give you another hint or another clue. So it's important and it's useful for you to do that. Think out loud. As you're thinking about a solution, you yourself go through it and think about and think of it out loud. Right? Say it out loud. Is what are the pros and cons of doing it this way? Sometimes, as you make a choice, and especially if it's, I'm going to go into the coding challenge bit, right? If you write some code and you're using a for loop instead of a while loop, well, why are you doing that, and what are some of the pros or some of the cons for doing that, right? Those choices that you're making, even for you, they may seem obvious at the time, but you are making choices, and so vocalize those choices. It'll really give the interviewer a lot more insight about your understanding of the problem. And as with everything, right, whenever you have a real difficult problem, we'll start to break it down into smaller chunks. That helps you kind of walk through it. You've heard maybe people say don't boil the ocean, or lots of different metaphors that people think to talk about and use to say, if the problem's super big, don't try to take it all at once. Break it down into smaller chunks. And then also bound your problem, right? I think this is really common, especially in the technical spaces. Find ways to really limit the possibilities, right? So, and this could be by asking clarifying questions, but also as you're going through your solution, what are the outer limits? What are some of the minimums that this problem applies to, or some of the maximums that it apply to, right? So certainly there's going to be the mainstream case that maybe is the most common, but start to think about those outer edges, and how does your solution handle itself when you start to get into those outer edges? And as you test the limits, what happens? And we all know, right? If for those of you that are coders, right, the garbage in, garbage out, right? There's always what people are supposed to do and what they're supposed to enter, and then there's what they actually enter. And it's like, why the hell would you do that, right? So, does your solution take into account some weirdness that people are going to inject into the system? So again, bound the problem, test the limits as you go through it. Also, like going back to earlier, look at the interviewer, right? While you discuss the problem. Yes, especially if you're writing or if you're doing something, you can look down and do what you need to do, but also look up and include the interviewer in your thought processes, whether you're in person or on Zoom like this. Always remember to kind of, and I know it's hard because there's not a person there, right? It's this little thing, the camera looking at you, but definitely always remember to include the interviewer while you're doing this. And again, ask clarifying questions. So I'm going to just pause for a minute and see, are there any questions? Anything that I should stop for, or should I keep going?
So there's a question in the Q&A. Juan, do you want me to jump in with those, or would you like to wait?
What do I think of sites like HackerRank and LeetCode in order to practice potential whiteboard programming questions? Yeah, absolutely. Those are great. And in fact, I don't mention HackerRank specifically, but I do make that as a recommendation a little bit further down in terms of some of the practice and some of the links that we have. Thank you for the question. And thanks, Daniel, for bringing my attention to it. Okay, so in fact, cue the next slide, right? Preparing for the technical interview. So yes, practice, right? And this goes back to HackerRank or some of those other websites. One is practice with whatever problems they have, and that always helps. It's kind of, it's kind of interesting. It's like the SAT test, right? It's like you never know what questions they're going to ask, and it's impossible to really prepare for the SAT because it's just so wide. But doing a bunch of practice tests kind of gets you familiar with the types of questions they're going to ask at the SAT, even if you don't know the specific question, right? So this is similar like that. Is HackerRank and some of those sites definitely go through and practice those. So you may not get an exact question. In fact, as an interviewer, I hope I don't give you the exact question that you've been practicing, right? Because I don't want you to just regurgitate something you've already been practicing. I want to see your problem solving skills. But having said that, it'd be good for you to have that practice, and that way you start to get a feel for what types of questions are out there, and perhaps how you might solve some of them. So I think that it's a good idea. The other thing is, when I say here, refresh yourself on key technology terms, right? I think that there's things sometimes that that you should know, right? But as a student, maybe you studied data structures, a year ago or a year and a half ago. Familiarize yourselves with those again. Some of the basics, right? If you're going into a company that's maybe heavy networking, well, and you took a networking class at some point, and there's kind of the 7 layers, and the transport layer and the internet layer and all these things, and go review that. Maybe make sure you're kind of fresh up on it because you might get a question on that, right? So I think there's certainly areas where you want to go review key technologies that you've already got on your belt, but maybe a little bit rusty in. And as far as your own projects, as I mentioned earlier, I think of good technical projects that you've been through or problems that you've had to overcome. It's important to be clear about, okay, here's the setup, right? Here's the problem statement. And here's the value, here's the benefit, here's what we were going to gain from solving this. Then, this is how we solved it. Kind of that architectural level definition is, and then you roll in the project, right? So these are some real key parts to answering the question about, some of the work that you've done. Again, mock interviews are fantastic, and certainly organizations like MESA help here a lot, right? With having the opportunity to attend career fairs, to do the networking, to do the mock interviews. All of that practice just makes you a better interviewer, and it puts you in kind of that more comfortable position, right? Because it's not brand new, so it helps the interview process when you've gone through it several times before. And then for as you start to get into the whiteboard or coding challenges, again, work on your gaps. Some of the things where you're a little bit rusty, go ahead and work on those. I feel like I've said that. I think I've covered this one already. What are your strengths? Where are your gaps? Work on some of that stuff. And then also, in some cases, there are partner exercises where where you're paired up with somebody, like the interview, especially if you come on site. It's not so much, a little bit harder on Zoom. But you come on site and there'd be the moderator, the person asking the questions, and then he'll give you another person that's going to work with you, right? So somebody that's on the team, and then the two of you together solve a problem, and then that tests your teamwork ability, right, and your ability to dialogue and communicate and take ideas from somebody. Now, the other person is not going to be the one solving it, right? The expectation is still that you solve it, but you're solving it with somebody. So this is also important to keep in mind. Okay, and again, seek online help, use available web tools, HackerRank being one of them. Okay, so here's where I switch over to hopefully kind of, it's not really hands-on, but a little bit more meaty examples. So what are the techniques? So as an interviewer, right? So put yourself in my shoes. As an interviewer, I'm trying to assess somebody's skill level. And I'm trying to assess, is this person going to be a good fit for my organization? Right? And yes, there's teamwork and all this other stuff that I've talked about, but now I'm really getting down to technically, is this person going to be a good fit? How do I test that? What are the different ways that I can test that, right? And there's many, but in general, there's kind of these different buckets that I've identified here. One is the deep dive on what you know. And so there, I'm not just asking you some random question out of the blue to see if you remember something you did a year and a half ago. I'm actually asking you specifically about something you know, maybe something I saw on your resume. Maybe as we were discussing, you mentioned something that I thought, oh, that's pretty interesting. Let me ask some more. Or it could be that I actually asked the question specifically, and I have an example here coming up in the slide. The other is some kind of brain teaser. So this is a little bit more out of the blue, but again, I'm trying to figure out your ability to, think on your feet. Oh, okay, this is kind of weird. How do I solve this problem? And then what I say here, the not too difficult coding problem, right? So we know that generally we only have about 45 minutes during an interview, so I need you to be able to solve it right within that time frame, and usually within maybe 10 or 15 minutes because we want to make room for other questions. But when you're on the spot, the not too difficult coding problem could seem really difficult, right? But these are the things that the tools I have at my disposal to try to understand if a candidate is going to be a good fit and a good fit technically in my organization. So let's go through that. Actually, this was supposed to be a build out, but darn, I must have messed something up here because it all went out. So the deep dive on what you know. So a sample question, and I use this a lot, right, is describe the most difficult technical problem you've had to overcome. And it's okay to pull from either school projects or job experience, right? So this is not, I'm not expecting, I know you guys are students, in some cases first year or second year, right? So you haven't had a ton of courses or maybe not a ton of internships. That's okay, right? This is a question about you and what you've done. And this is why I say prepare, right? So as you're going through this, think about how would you answer this question? I mean, what is a difficult technical problem you've had to overcome? And so, I provide an answer here, just an example. And this is actually somebody that I had talked to previously, and this person did have an internship, and she said, last summer I had an internship in a cybersecurity group, right? Had to work on both the application layer and the back end, where I needed to do things like input filtering and protecting the application from cross-site scripting and SQL injection. So that's a bunch of buzzwords, right? but this is like handing me a candy jar, right? Because I'm like, oh, this is awesome. He just gave me a ton. In this sentence, or these two sentences, I have a ton to ask about now, right? So, well, what was the technical challenge? So they set it up, and then they went on to give me more detail, right? But they gave me a decent setup. My first question is, okay, well, what was the technical challenge? What was difficult about it, right? Because they may not go all the way there in the first time. But then I'll just start, what they fed me, I just start asking it right back. Well, what do you mean by application layer and backend, right? And that really gives me that view of, Do they really understand these things, or are they just giving me buzzwords? Right. And I think application layer and backend, most people probably get, right. But then they got real specific. Well, okay, well, what is cross-site scripting? Have them explain that to me. Are there different types of cross-site scripting, or is it all one simple thing, right? Well, what allows a hacker to do cross-site scripting? How do you protect from cross-site scripting, right? Again, when this is what this person volunteered, and now I can really drill down on it, right? They put this up here. They claim to be familiar with these subjects, and now I can just drill down on it and really understand. Do they really understand all this? How much did they learn? By the way, it's okay to say, oh, you know what? Yeah, cross-site scripting, but I was exposed to this, and I don't really know all the deeper layers, right? I don't know how hackers do it. I was just trying to find them, right? I don't know how they go behind the scenes to do it. So that's another important thing. I don't know if I actually wrote that in somewhere in here, but it's okay not to know something, right? But just be prepared when I ask you or an interviewer asks you to come up with your problem that you've solved. Be prepared for somebody to just dive right in, because this is something that you said you've solved, so I want to understand how much you understand about it. Anyway, so that's one example, right? So that's kind of the deep dive on what you know. Another example, and good. So this one I did remember to build out, is what I'll call a brain teaser, right? And in this case, let me just say I have 2 bags of marbles. One bag R of red marbles, one bag B of blue marbles. I take a handful from bag B, put it in bag R. Then I take a handful from bag R, now containing both red and blue marbles, and put it in bag B. Right? So that's my setup. What's happening here? Oh, okay, there we go. So the question is, well, is the number of red marbles, after I do these 2 handfuls, is the number of red marbles in bag B always equal to the number of blue marbles in bag R? So as an interviewer, one of the things that they teach us is never ask yes or no questions. It's terrible because they're dead end questions, right? Yes or no, and then dead end. But that applies more to, have you had a technical problem that was difficult for you to overcome, right? I don't want the person to then say no, right? So I don't want a yes or no question that way, right? In that case, that's why I ask, tell me about a difficult question you've had to overcome, or a difficult technical problem you've had to overcome. In this case, though, I intentionally make this a yes or no question. But what I want from the person is not really a yes or no. I want a thought process. And this is one of the areas where I said sometimes I leave things a little bit. They're not traps, but there's just a little bit vague because I want to see the thought process from the interviewee. So even though this is a yes or no question, well, what's the process of answering the question? Definitely don't just say yes or no. Even if you know, it's like for a fact, you went through this mentally and you solved all the things that there are to solve about this question, and you're very definitive, say yes or no. Even if you do that, I'm going to ask why, but don't do that. Or maybe you could say yes because or whatever, but really start to think about the possibilities out loud. And I think that this is safer because you may think that you've thought about everything in that split second and that you have a clear answer. But give yourself time, right? Do this as kind of a favor to yourself. Don't just answer with a yes or no. Start to talk through the question and the possibilities, right? So you ask, well, okay, a handful. What does a handful mean? Is a handful defined? Is there a certain number of marbles? Could it be different size handfuls? Could it be that a handful had 5 marbles one way and then another handful had 3 marbles the other way, or 10 marbles the other way? You just think through that, right? Give the interviewer that knowledge that in the process that you're having to go through. Um, what okay, so that was the first question: is could they be different size handfuls? And you can even ask that. You can do it a couple of different ways. You can say, well, if the handfuls are not defined, then these things apply. Um, and then the interviewer in this case might say, well, okay, let's define it. Let's say a handful is 10 marbles. Then you want to bound it. It says, oh, okay, well, it's 10 marbles. What if I take the first handful and I've got 10 marbles going into, 10 blue marbles going into the red bag. Now I've got the 10 marbles. I go and get another 10 marbles. What if I get all of the blue marbles again and bring them over, right? So that's kind of one extreme case. It's unlikely to happen, but it's one extreme case. What if I get 0 blue marbles? I get all red marbles and bring them over. What does that do? How does that balance my case? So those questions and that thought process will help the interviewer understand that you are thinking about a variety of things here, not just going after the simple case. So once you kind of look at the limits and the outer limits, and you start thinking about the in-betweens, what about all those other cases, and how can you generalize an answer to make sure that it incorporates the more common cases as well as those outer edge cases. So that's what we would want in this kind of brain teaser, right? Talk through it, start thinking about possibilities, start thinking of questions to ask, for example, the size of the handful, that kind of thing, right? So this is what I'll call, the brain teaser. And it's, it's not, you don't necessarily code this. You just think about, this problem. So I think there's another question. I'm going to go ahead and stop. Danielle, actually, how do I have an hour, or what's the scheduled time here? I want to make sure I use the time wisely. Danielle?
Oh,
can you guys hear me?
Sorry, Danielle actually got knocked out by a lightning.
Oh, okay. House. So Thomas, yeah, go to you. How much time do I have?
We're at 3:40. We have 5-10 minutes.
Okay, I'll kind of rush through this. The question is, have I ever hired someone who didn't get the correct answer? Absolutely. I mean, this is nobody has the correct answers to everything. But so it's not a deal breaker if you don't get the correct answer. Understanding the thought process is more important. And I see another question came in. It's actually a really long question. So I'm gonna run through the next one just to get through the important parts of the presentation, and then I'll come back to Q&A. Okay, so the third one is the coding challenge, right? And for the software engineers among you could be interested here. And I'm not going to solve a coding problem here, but I'm just going to present it just to kind of present the techniques again. I actually have a YouTube link on here, and this is actually an example from Google, right? So a couple of Google engineers go through and they do some. I think it's terrific. So go look at it, because they actually role play it and show you how to do these things that I'm talking about. But in this particular case, the setup is, we'll write a function that takes a sorted array of numbers and now puts a yes or no to the following, right? Is there a pair of numbers that add up to a specific value? And in this case, right, the sample will be, okay, the target value is going to be 8. So what I mean here by specific value, the number is 8. And then I need to identify in whatever the input array is, are there a pair of numbers? Are there 2 numbers in the array that will add up to the number 8? As we can see here quickly, right? Array 1, no. The answer would be no. Array 2, you've got the 4 and the 4, so the answer would be yes. So it's simple to visualize, but now how do you make a computer do this, right? And so you start to think again. Remember, okay, this is a coding challenge. I'm going to have to write code. But let me start by asking clarifying questions, right? Keep calm, take a deep breath, don't rush. For example, well, are the numbers always going to be integers? That helps you define the type, for example. Then you think out loud, right? Solve the problem with words. Don't start coding, but solve the problem with words. Well, I could start with the first value and compare to every other value, then iterate, right? So with array 1, I could say, okay, 1. So 1 plus 2, no, that's not 8. 1 plus 3, no, that's not 8. 1 plus 9, no, that's not 8. Okay, now go back to 2, right? And 2 plus 1 and 2 plus 3. And, depending on how you set this up, if it's a couple of for loops, right, there's different ways to set this up. It could be pretty exhaustive, which would be ultimately lead to the correct answer, but maybe it's a little bit too exhaustive, right? Maybe there's ways to optimize and do it a little bit better. And again, I'm not going to go through the details. In the YouTube video, they'll give you more. But going back to what I mentioned earlier in terms of bound your problem, what are kind of the upper and lower limits, and does your solution work for a mainstream case as well as outer limits, right? So they've given you a couple of sample arrays, but these are just samples, right? This isn't the exhaustive list. So then you want to start to think about, well, what are some of the things at the very low end, right? What about these other arrays, the 1, 1, 1, 1 example, or the 9, 12, 9, 10, 11, 12 example? Those are, the one with ones, I'm just never going to get to 8, right? They're all below the number 8. So just by looking at it, I know that, but how's the computer going to know that? Do you really have to compare the one to the other ones to the other ones and do the addition? Or if you go, is there some way to optimize that says, oh yeah, there's no way anything's ever going to add up to 8 here? Or in the other case, when you've got 9, 10, 11, 12, this is sorted. So the moment you see that 9 in the first slot, you know that every other number is going to be larger than 9. So you're never going to get to 8, right? So you don't have to do a full exhaustive iterative list of addition. You just know that once you see that 9 in the first slot, you're never going to get to something that's going to add up to 8, and you bounce out, right? So those are the examples that, as an interviewer, I'm looking for you to really dissect this issue. It may seem really simple, and you can start coding and write something real quick, but how do you optimize, and how do you take out some of the what are the mins or the maxes, and how do you take out some of the problems in the edges? And there's a lot more to this. Again, I encourage you guys to go look at that video. And then also just break it down into smaller pieces. You can say, oh, okay, well, there's in the examples when nothing's going to add up to it, or everything's too small to add up to 8, maybe I can handle that in a specific way. And then when everything's too large to add up to 8, you can handle that in a specific way. And then you got kind of that sweet spot in the middle where some things are smaller than 8, larger than 8, and you have to do a little bit more math to actually figure it out, right? So break it up into smaller chunks and then solve for each of those chunks. Okay, so let's see, what do I have here? Technical resource guide. Again, I again put the link into this coding example by Google at the top. Bunch of stuff here to go look at. As far as the VMware goes, here's a lot of different ways to keep up with what we're doing. And all of these social media and LinkedIn and everything. So follow us on all of these if you want to learn everything about VMware. And then in the back of slides, there's a lot more general interview stuff that actually was part of this slide that I used for a different audience, but I left them in the backup even though they're not specific to the technical interview. Okay, so that's what I had. I could go back to, actually, let me go ahead and read this third question. But if you can open up the mic, I mean, I'd be happy to just answer questions off the cuff if people have any other questions live. So let's see, Luis, sorry, I hope this isn't off topic. Okay, resume and cover letter. Don't have engineering work experience, I have projects. So, yeah, so I mean, in terms of general interviewing, how to get to the interview is the question, right? And do your best. In the cases where you don't have an internship or even specific courses to point to, then perhaps you have volunteer experience of what you've done. You've had just regular work, maybe paid work experience. It's not specific to the field that you're going after, but it's still, if it's work, you put that as part of your resume, right? So you start to build. You want to frame a part of yourself and what responsibilities have you taken on there, right? So beyond the technical, when I'm looking at again, going back to the more general interview types of questions, I want to see initiative. I want to see leadership. I want to see curiosity. Right? Those are the things that will lead to a good problem solver and a good employee and somebody that'll fit on my team. So start to fill in from that perspective to put those things on your resume and get some of that interest, right? And just understand that it's going to be hard, but keep plugging away. Oh, I see more questions. Okay, if you need to think about a question, how long of a pause is appropriate? So it's interesting because I don't have a specific length, right? It's okay to pause. Now, I would say 30 seconds to a minute. It does start to get awkward if you go beyond that. But what you can do is sometimes you can ask a question, a clarifying question, and kind of break the silence that way. But that's where some of the preparation ahead of time comes in. And that's where doing mock interviews and doing some of this other stuff that starts to prepare you for those types of questions starts to prepare you, giving you a sense of what it is and bringing those ideas to mind a little bit quicker. When you think about a minute, it's actually a long time to be silent. Now, it is okay to pause, but like I said, maybe think for yourself how you're going to answer some of these questions ahead of time. You don't have to rush. It's definitely good to take time to pause and think. If it's a technical question, like if you're like really trying to solve it, that's where the clarifying questions come in, and let the interviewer know what you're thinking during that silence. That's an important part of it also. Go ahead.
Juan, I allowed everyone to speak. So if you have questions, you can raise your hand. That's a function that you can do. And when you speak, just give us your name and your campus and then your question.
Okay. So the other thing, again, I think it's still in the chat, is the link to sign up to VMware and get your information into our general database. So please do remember to go do that. And reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm available to connect, and if you have any follow-on questions. Oh, I see another question. Sorry, or maybe I skipped it earlier. I don't know. As a third-year CSC student with no work experience in the field besides school projects, what are interviewers expecting out of me when hiring? So your resume will tell us, right? If you have no work experience, then I'm going to focus on school projects, and that's okay. Right? I mean, not everybody has work experience. What I want to see is good ability to problem solve. I want to see good ability to communicate while you're problem solving. Again, and this goes more to general, not just a technical piece, right? But in team project, did you take the initiative? Do you have leadership? Are you involved in maybe volunteer organizations or other kinds of organizations on campus where you're taking leadership roles? All of that stuff goes into the decision of bringing somebody on for an interview. So it's not just work experience. There's definitely a full picture to take in when we bring in candidates.
So thank you, Juan. And I just wanted to let folks know, I don't know if you guys were here for one of the recruiter panels, but the recruiter from VMware was telling us that they have over 750 internships available right now. So I think one of the things that you can do is look into your profiles here on Jumpstart and make sure that you have all the information that's filled out, because every place where you have a presence, you're telling a story. And if your information is only partially filled out or you haven't done everything that's listed there. What it's telling everyone is that you're not thorough, that you're not reliable, that you are not taking this particular presence seriously. So if you're going to have a profile on Jumpstart, you might as well fill everything out, and absolutely make sure to be mindful of all your school projects and your skills and your interest areas, and upload your resume and all that. So, oh wait, was everyone's question answered?
Yeah, please let me know if there's something I missed. I thought I got them all.
I think you answered Luis Valenzuela's question, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Danielle, you want to close us out?
Sure. In the chat, I'd like to see everyone give Juan a very big thank you for all of his help and information. And we will make sure to get this deck out to you guys, so you'll be able to go back to it and reference. We'd also like to make sure that you fill out this survey that's in the chat right here, so that you can give us feedback about this session, about different sessions that you would like to see in the future. And if there's not anything else, I think it's time for folks to get their weekend started. Tom, anything else for you?
I think we're all good. Thank you, Juan, very much. It was such a thorough presentation.
My pleasure.
And we'll get all this material out to students. I mean, I was amazed at how, like, we had 32 attendees at the peak, and folks stuck it through for the whole thing. And it's the last session of the day, so it was riveting. Thank you very much.
It was good enough to keep them, huh?
Yes.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. And like I said, I mean, as you mentioned, Tom, thanks for pulling that out. Is we do have a lot of internships openings available right now, and please do. The other thing is we do is look us up with all these links, and also go look at our internship search, internships, and see what's available, and you can apply through our careers website.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right. Terrific. Well, thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later.